And welcome to the Discipleship on Repeat podcast. I am your host, Matt, and I got with me my buddy, as always, Chris.
Hey, Matt. How are you, man?
Doing great, man. Glad to do another episode with you, man. Just excited to be here today, and we got a good one.
Yeah.
I think our listeners are going to like this one a lot.
Yeah, this is going to be real good. It's a struggle.
It is. And we're talking about faith today, and is faith enough? That is the question here. Really, we're gonna dive in right into this week, folks, on really just faith and works and deeds and how they intertwine. Which one comes first, the chicken or the egg argument, really? And where's your works come from? And I know I've struggled with this one, man.
Yeah, it's hard to stay focused on the intent behind it. Are our works because of our faith, or is our faith just kind of grown out of our works?
Exactly. And we got some great topics to share with everybody here today. Yep. And I think it's going to be exciting for us to give a little bit of how that's impacted our lives too, because I know for me, it's been a struggle too, evaluating, where my motives come from, you know? So I think that it's just something that I think we all struggle with at times, if we're being honest. And I think that it's important to share that here today. So I'm really excited to do this podcast with you today. This topic has been real exciting for me.
Yeah, this is going to be really good.
Yeah, well, it's a good deal. So let's dive into it, man. So before we do that, though, we got our left-hand shake for our listeners out there in the week. So we're going to be jumping into that today, and I'm excited to talk about a guy that I met. I'm going to talk about this guy named Mark that I met. Had a business meeting with this guy, and just quickly turned into this spiritual conversation. I could tell he met with me in my office. This is a few weeks ago. And I could tell, like, he needed access to funds, and we started talking about why. And it turns out he's a big time philanthropist, really. Yeah. Which his prompting, which is a great topic for today. And no accidents, but Mark was in need of funds to help out the underprivileged in different parts of the world, including Africa and even China. And just to listen to this guy talk, man, was just, I think he spent an hour with me in my office that day, and probably could have sat there. I almost felt like taking the guy to lunch or something, hey, hey, man, I'd love to hear a lot more, he's an older guy. He's been through a lot. And just to hear his stories talk about how he came to faith and how he's seen God work and what his promptings are and what he's done with his business to help the underprivileged in the world today. I'm telling you, man, it lit me on fire. Yeah. But I tell you, you don't get there unless you're willing to take that prompting from God, and just ask those questions, and that's really the motive of this left-hand shake, to remind everybody out there, I hurt my hand a few years ago. And I have this issue with my hand, and I shaking hands with the left hand, so I have to so a lot of times reach out with that left, and just say, hey, I'm just going to reach out with the left today, if that's okay. And it sparks a conversation, a lot of times, and every time that I have to consider shaking somebody's hand, I got to think about, okay, can I do it with my right hand or not? And if I do it with the left hand, it's going to remind me of that posture of vulnerability that we've talked about on the podcast before. For anybody who hasn't listened before, we encourage you to go back and check out our stories, even in the first episode, and talk about what this thing that we're trying to hopefully viral someday to really make a difference in our world. But this gentleman, Mark, was just a great example. Got an opportunity just to, I took the prompting. I said, okay, I asked him some questions. I even shared some vulnerable stories in my own life. And before I knew it, man, this guy was just really just pouring out. And I could feel like God was using him to make it just really to light me on fire to do more for him, which is great I think for this episode that we're going to share, and obviously gives me a lot of inspiration to even do this podcast and begin with.
Yeah, man. What a great encouragement.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. I really enjoyed this guy. I hope I get to see him again. Honestly.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
man, next time invite me, we'll all go to lunch.
I know, right?
That'd be great.
Yeah, I will. I'll see if I can.
Yeah, man. Man, that's exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. And you got a story for yourself, right?
I do. So a couple weeks ago, we attended a men's breakfast at our church.
Okay.
And
that was fun.
It was a great time. it was amazing turnout. And one of the things that happened was, as they were setting it up, as our pastors were setting it up, I was asked to be a table leader. And I know they had to ask a bunch of folks to come be table leaders. They like to have generally 2 people at the table that can lead and kind of toss things back and forth, kind of like we do in the podcast.
Yeah.
But it really helps to spur on conversation, to have different perspectives there. And the good problem to have is we had so many people, they weren't able to have 2 leaders at a table. Like we had that many guys. It was a men's breakfast. That many guys show up, and so it was fantastic. All the table leaders wound up with their own tables, and we even had a table that didn't have a table leader. Like they just didn't have enough.
Yeah.
So it was fantastic.
God really provided for that.
And so one of the things they had to do was throw extra chairs down at our tables. And so rather than have 6 of us at a table, we jammed in 8 guys at a table.
Yeah.
Which is great. Wherever there's food, there's always going to be guys that are hungry. So that was fantastic. And one of the guys that sat down was this younger guy. He was probably in his early 20s. Introduced himself and knew the guy that was sitting right next to me. And so they kind of just made small talk back and forth as we were eating. And then he was real quiet during the discussion, and which was fine. So I got him to talk a little bit and share, and it was great. Well, then afterwards, I was getting ready to leave and go home after the event, and had said, goodbye to the pastor and all the things. And as I'm getting ready to walk out, this guy that I know that serves in a different area at church, he comes over and grabs me by the arm and is like, "Hey man, thanks for having my son at your table."
Oh.
And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Yeah, the young guy that sat down at your table, that was my son." And he said, I asked him if he would go sit over there with the other guy that he knew. That way he wasn't at my table. And I'm like, well, that's kind of strange, and I'm looking at him with that look on my face like I don't get it. And he says, "Yeah, I had some stuff happen to me this week. I lost my job, and I was needing to be vulnerable with the guys at my table, but I wasn't ready to tell him." And I said, "Oh." I said, "Well, I get that, And I said, he's a big boy. He's 20.
Yeah.
Like, you could share that with him, and bring that vulnerability.
Probably should.
And strengthen your relationship with him." And he just looked at me with this look on his face like, wow, I never thought about that. Like, he was still looking at him like he was a kid. And so it really kind of turned into this conversation as we were standing there. And he had the look on his face like he just was desperate. And in that moment, I'm not the most in tune with my emotions. So, I hear that sometimes. And so I'm looking at him, and it dawns on me like, this guy needs something from me. He's looking for something from me.
Yeah.
And I realized, like, the Holy Spirit put it in my heart, like, you need to pray for him, like, right now.
Yeah.
And so I just asked him, said, "Hey man, can I pray for you right now?" And he was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And so he just, I put my hand on his shoulder, and I prayed over him, prayed over his family, the whole job situation and his relationship with his son, and just tried to send him off encouraged, in a good prayer. And, I was just grateful for that. And I left and went home and went about my week. And then I came back the next week to church, and I'm getting ready to go serve. I serve as an usher leader at church. And
right.
So he serves as a leader over at our info wall. And so he came over to me and he goes, "Hey man, I just want to say thank you so much for praying for me and for having my son at your table." And he was like, "I took up your advice." And like, it was awesome to have that conversation with him and for us to like deepen our relationship. And he was like, "Thank you so much for your prayers." And I was blown away. Like, we were both standing there in tears in the lobby with, several hundred people awesome, walking by us. And it was so cool just to have like that reassurance come back around of like, I was doing the right thing. Like, that was the Spirit moving in me to give him that reassurance, and then have it come full circle back and the report come back like, yeah, your obedience paid off in my family. So that was super cool.
Yeah, and very encouraging too.
Yeah.
And that's really the whole spirit of this left-handed shake out there for folks. Is just really to understand that you're going to have promptings. You need to take advantage of those, and it's going to be a little uncomfortable, like a left-handed shake. You know, people aren't used to that, right? So I think if we just put ourselves out there and see what kind of difference we can make in somebody else's life just by being uncomfortable, having that moment of obedience there. And really, it's a great story because this guy gave you some feedback about how he almost like paying it forward to somebody else, and in his own family, and look at what he's doing. So Fantastic story, man. And that's definitely the spirit of the left-handed shake, and that's what we want to encourage all our listeners out there to do the same, is to have those moments of vulnerability and let God do the work.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, man. That's great. Well, let's move on then to the topic of the week. Let's jump back to that. And remember, the title of this one is Faith Enough, and we want to study James chapter 2 for everybody there at home. Looking at verses 14 through 18 here, about faith and deeds. So I'm going to read 14 through 18 for you guys. Here it comes. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, by faith itself, it is not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. Great story from James there. Yeah, and he goes on to talk a little bit about even demons believing in God, and a little Abraham and Rahab we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. But I really like this story. I think James is really diving into really the two types of faith that you and I have talked about a lot here, is legitimate and illegitimate faith.
That's right.
And I think that, as we look at the story of Abraham that James talks about here, authentic faith, legitimate,
Right.
Abraham waited his whole life for Isaac, right? A guy who's an answered prayer, then God said, hey, I want you to sacrifice him. And without question, he went and did it. That is the type of works that we all should aspire to do. Abraham's faith led him to works, right? So he's a great example of that authentic faith there, as where the illegitimate faith, as we're going to call it, more secondhand, more like, hey, I'm just more about obligation, or maybe trying to earn my way to heaven. But as we know, as you're going to talk about here, you've got some things to share that, it takes, we're saved by grace, and our works is not going to get us there, but God wants to use us. So there's some differences, and you got some things to share about that today, right?
Yeah, sure do. So first I wanted to kind of start by, I know that kind of like faith versus works is along the same topics that, this topic line, and it's kind of one of those, like, sometimes that's confusing. And so I just wanted to kind of start out by giving us kind of a broad definition of what faith is. And so knowing that, I think will kind of help set the foundation for all of this. So in Hebrews 11:1, it says, faith is the confidence in what we hope for and the assurance about what we do not see. So faith is assuring us that our hope is actually in reality. I thought that was powerful. I also wanted to share that we are saved by grace through faith. That's Ephesians 2:8 and 9.
Right.
And so grace, as you mentioned, grace is so important in this equation because it's by grace that we're forgiven. And grace is that gift from God. We didn't earn that.
No.
It's unmerited, like, love and forgiveness. And so God brought that to the table through Jesus and his sacrifice for us. And so faith is believing in what Jesus did, and the grace is what comes because of his sacrifice for us. And so when you put those together, right, we're saved through grace by faith. And so I think that's important to keep those two together, like they're just intertwined, so connected. And so in Ephesians 2:8 and 9, it says, it's by grace that you've been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It's a gift from God, not by works, so that no one can boast. And so I really like that because it directly applies to what we're talking about today. We're saved by the faith in our grace and through grace, but it's not because of our works. We did nothing to earn that salvation.
Right.
And so I thought that's so key to what we're doing. And then in Romans 11:6, it says, if by grace, then it cannot be based on works. If it were, then grace would no longer be grace.
Yeah.
You can't earn your way to heaven.
No. And our enemy wants to tell us the opposite. So I think it's a great place to start out in Ephesians 2 right here, because I think there's a good portion of people out there that have been, believe the lie that, hey, I've got to continue to do some, works to get to heaven and to be saved. when reality is Ephesians clearly states that's not true.
Right. Yeah. Trying to be the good person is not going to get you in.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think that's critical to understand, is that it's that faith by grace that you're getting in. It's not because of your works that you're getting in.
Yes, and that's the foundation we want to set to all the listeners out there. We make no qualms about it. I mean, this is, we're saved by grace. That's our salvation right there. Jesus paid the price for that. But what are we going to do with that? And that's what we need to talk about next.
Right. And the works are important.
For sure.
So it goes ahead and it talks about in Titus 2, 13, 14. I won't read the whole verses to you.
Okay.
But the last part of that verse, it says that we're eager to do good. And that we want to do good works. And so we want to do those works because they're like the fruit of that faith. So our faith is producing those works in us. And so I think that's important, is that our works and our attitude towards the work is out of that faith. It's not our attitude, we have to do work to earn faith. It's because of our faith, we get to do work. And we have that attitude towards that. I think that a lot of it is that mindset that we bring to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Big believer in mindset and attitude in life, and your attitude about the works you have and where that comes from, that mindset and that motive is critical here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, as we go on down, and like you read about Abraham, his sacrifice, or his willingness to go and sacrifice his son Isaac, that was the son that he loved the most. That was the one that God had promised him.
Right.
And so in obedience, he was willing to go sacrifice his son. Ultimately God didn't make him sacrifice his son. God was watching him to see, and he was proving his faith by his deeds, just like you were talking about there in James. And so I think, Abraham's actions made his faith complete. And that's what really kind of summed up his faith, is he was completely obedient to the point where he was willing to follow whatever God had told him to do. He was just going to do it.
Yeah.
And thank God told him to stop.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, where would we be if he didn't? But yeah, this is his prized possession. Let's put this in perspective. You know what I mean? This is whatever, we hope that at the end of the day, your first priority in life is Jesus and your faith. But there's things in life that we all enjoy. Let's be honest, right? We enjoy these certain things, certain people, relationships, etc. Abraham was willing to put his most prized earthly possession up without question.
Right.
That to me, that's the epitome of faith, right before the works. So this is a great example. James couldn't have picked a better one, obviously.
Oh no, yeah, I think it was great, and I just think how mad Sarah would have been when he came home without a son.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Try to explain that one. So God definitely made it unbluffable. There's no talking around this for Abraham. Like, he had to step up to the plate and do it.
Yeah.
And God was watching him the whole time. And I think for us to walk so boldly into our faith like that can be challenging. And like I said, I think we have that faith that's so important, but the works are important. And so you see from Abraham where those works came into play. And in Scripture, in Revelation 22:12, it says, I'm coming soon. This is Jesus talking. He says, I'm coming soon, and my reward is with me, and I will give each person according to what they've done. Right? So Jesus is gonna look at it at the end. What did you do with your time?
Right.
You had this faith. What did you do with it? And how did you live out those actions? And so that led, from that verse, it led me down to Matthew 25, 31 through 46. And it's a really lengthy passage there, but he's talking about the sheep and the goats.
Yeah.
And he's explaining the difference where one will get the eternal salvation and the other one will be eternally damned. And he's talking about the things that we're supposed to be doing, the good works. What are those good works? And so he's explaining that we'll be invited in to take our inheritance because of our works and our faith. When we fed the hungry, when we clothed the needy, when we gave drink to the thirsty, when we visited the sick and helped them, when we visited people in prison. So really, what's it about? It's about us serving others like we're serving Jesus, and that's what Jesus says there is we're serving them. It equates to serving him.
Right.
And I think that's the bottom line, is because of our faith, we're stepping into those acts of service and we're serving him. We're not serving. We are serving others, but we're serving them like we're serving Him.
Exactly. And there's a significant amount of reward that's there, that God, He wants to provide these rewards to us. He gave, so you talk about that in Matthew 25 there, or, in those passages there. But we know, obviously, Abraham, his father Abraham, right? I mean, he because of his actions, it started with faith that led to works, that led to rewards, right? So, and those rewards were great, Abraham. I mean, I hope that we have the opportunity to meet in heaven. You know what I mean? He's going to be a popular guy. But and then also in James, he mentions Rahab here in the end of the passage here at the end of chapter 2. And as you know, I've talked a lot about Rahab. I love the story of Rahab. We'll definitely have a podcast on that in the near future. But I just love the story that Rahab, great example here of her. It talks about her faith and her actions because of it. And this is a lady that obviously was living in sin. She didn't have to clean. She didn't even clean herself up. Right? She was still in the sin. What was going on? And she basically lied to people, lied to her authorities. That in order to protect God's chosen people. And then because of that, her rewards were being the lineage of Jesus Christ Himself.
That's right.
So, I mean, to think about, hey, okay, Matt, Chris, I mean, okay, I hear what you're saying out there, but who am I to be used by God? I got so much. I got all these problems. I got all these shortcomings. I mean, I just sinned 5 minutes ago.
Right.
I mean, what can I do to help God? Well, let me tell you right there, you got the wrong mindset. That's where the enemies would love for you to stay where you're at.
That's
right. You need to let go of that, repent, turn from that, and allow God to use you. Because ultimately, you're not going to be defined by that as long as you choose otherwise, because Jesus paid the price.
That's right.
It's just up to you to willing to accept that unmerited gift, that grace, in Ephesians 2, right? So we need to have that mindset, and Rahab here is a great example too, because ultimately, she just stepped into it right then and there. She didn't have much question. She knew it was the right. She had a reverent fear of God, and seen everything that happened in all the other places, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm all into this guy, and what do I need to do to help him? Yeah, sure. What do you guys need?
That's right.
So and other rewards that she got was fantastic.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, so I love that, and I think that going on to a little bit more about that legitimate faith versus illegitimate faith. Abraham and Rahab, of course, great examples of that. But also, we want to encourage our listeners. If you are in that spot where hey, I'm a little unsure. I'm a little unsure about where my faith is. Is it legitimate or is it illegitimate? We talked about the authentic side, but what about if you're in this secondhand, illegitimate, area? And what I would tell everybody out there is to remember, obviously, faith by grace is what gets you there first, right?
That's right.
So don't be listening to the devil. Don't be listening to the enemy tell you otherwise. And I know that for me, this was a big part of my life. I had areas there's many years in my life, especially in my 20s and such, where I was in situations where I didn't feel like God could use me. I knew that I was saved. I remember I told the story, of course, when I was 7 years old. I knew that God, the Spirit was in me, but I just felt so far from God, and I just feel like, almost like I believed the lie that, hey, maybe that wasn't real when I was 7 years old, and maybe I didn't really have that true authentic faith like Abraham and Rahab and other family members that I knew and people in my life. So I was, I didn't feel like, I just believed that lie and just felt like, okay, maybe my faith is only because of secondhand, because of the people that I was in. I watched my grandmother. We went to church, and my parents and everybody, a lot of Christian people around me. So I really had to question that, and I had to fight through that. And unfortunately, I've made a lot of mistakes. It's unfortunate, but that's part of life. And, thankfully, though, I've been redeemed of that. I'm walking in faith now, but, I went to too many funerals as a young, in my 20s, of too many friends that I had lost due to various things, of just people that unfortunately, didn't have, I don't know, obviously, every story, but, I would wish those people were still around today. I would love to give them a hug and tell them, like, hey, there's always better ways, So there's a cost, that we have if we don't obey, So I want to talk a little bit about what those costs are, because if we do have faith and we don't have take action, there's costs involved, right? And we look at Matthew 7. It's a great example.
Yeah.
Right? We talked about that. Jesus was very clear here when he says, Matthew 7:21 through 23, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and in your name drive out demons and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Mm-hmm. Got to be one of the scariest passages in all the Bible, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah. And I think if that passage does terrify you, then that's what our enemy would love for you to stay in, that fear. But I would encourage everybody to think about it the other way around, like, hey, what can I do today so I'm not hearing that from Jesus when that day comes?
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's where moving away from that secondhand faith, realizing that you're stuck in that secondhand faith rut, right? I grew up in the church and this and that. Like, I did too.
Yeah.
And my kids have grown up in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And how important it is for them to be there weekly with us. I think it's one of those where we kind of take that for granted. Like, they're going to church and they're going to the kids' area and they're learning about God and all these things, and it's fantastic. They're in the Word, they're in small groups, and they're doing all these things, and that's fantastic. But their faith is not my faith, and so that's what I've reiterated several times with our kids is like, I'm working on this relationship with Jesus, and so I'm letting my wife and my kids see me in this relationship.
Yes.
And I'm modeling that for them, and at the same time I'm telling them my relationship will not get you into heaven.
Right.
My relationship will get me into heaven. Your relationship will get you into heaven. And so it's their faith in Jesus. And so it is kind of scary when you're talking to your younger kids and you're like, man, or even your older kids, I just really want you to have your own faith and belief in Jesus, and not rest on your laurels thinking that my faith is good enough for you. Like, I need them to step into that belief and take their action, right? So they need to take the same action steps that we need to take.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's important as parents, we do model that for them, especially when they're at a young age, right? We want to model what it looks like to be a Christian father or Christian mother, whatnot. But ultimately, it's on them at some point, and we have to realize that, hey, you need to, we've shown you what it's like for our individual faith, but what are you doing? You know what I mean? Especially as they get older, and as my boys are older now, 18 and 19 years old, that, that's where I'm at. That's the season that I'm in, is to help them understand, I've done modeled it, right, for, almost 2 decades for them.
Right.
But what are they doing now on their own? Are they just doing it out of obligation to go to, hey, Dad, we can go to church, we can, whatever, we even, we'll pray at dinner sometimes, Dad, if you want us to, just Dad, but are they doing those things? Are they genuinely having a relationship with Christ? Or are they just doing it out of secondhand obligation? What I mean? Are they stepping into tithing? Are they stepping into daily prayer and promptings, right? And that's the things that we have to work on, and be an example for them too. I think and as our children get older, and as people and other people in our life too, you start, once they've, you hope that they have that faith and they understand that Ephesians 2 states there, but you want to also, like, hey, is this authentic? I hope that you're true. You're not doing this for me. or your mother or whatnot,
Right.
or your boss or anyone else, right? It's more about, hey, we want this to be legit. That's what Jesus wants.
That's right. That's right. I think it goes back to that. If you were serving people and loving people like you were loving Jesus, then that's what we're shooting for. Is that out of our faith we're loving people and we're serving God.
Right. We are the hands and the feet at the end of the day.
That's ultimately it.
So that's really what we want this podcast to be about for everybody out there, is just to help everyone understand that you don't have to listen to the lies from the enemy, that you are saved by grace if you just choose to. Jesus paid the price. But what are you going to do from here? Right. Your works should not be to gain your salvation or your faith. It's because of your faith you're doing this.
That's right.
So do other people see that in your life? Do people know that, hey, that Chris and Matt guy, those are Christian dudes, man. And how do I know that? Well, it's because of what they do. It's the actions they have.
It's the way they're living.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the difference between right living or right thinking and right living, right? We can think that, that, hey, we're good. Hey, we got faith. All right, we're good. We just got faith. We checked the box. We're good, right? Mm-hmm. Well, how's that playing out in your life? Because I think when we get to heaven, that we're going to have to, I just have I hope that there's more pros and cons, as far as the promptings, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I say pros and cons, but it's more about, when Jesus looks at us and he's going to say, okay, here's all the opportunities I gave you. Which ones did you actually, do, right? Well, I hope I did more than I didn't,
Right.
But that's, the reality is nobody bats 1,000. And I don't think Jesus is not expecting that from us. But I hope that you did more than you didn't.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to those verses in Matthew. Yeah. Are you with the sheep or are you with the goats? Yeah. Are you getting in eternally because of the things you've done and the way you served him? And I think it's easy to brush off the promptings of the Holy Spirit. Yeah. We've talked about that before, and I think it's easy to brush those aside because they seem so trivial sometimes. Mm-hmm. Helping somebody with their shopping cart at the grocery store, or just even putting it away. A loose cart in the parking lot. Nobody likes to get a door ding. No. But you'll see somebody just randomly push one out there and walk away. And those are the little things that I think make big impacts in the kingdom, where it just demonstrates our faithfulness and leaning into that and being obedient to the Holy Spirit's direction. One of those times that I was thinking about was I used to serve on the parking team at church. Mm-hmm. I was the parking team leader, and my wife was one of the pastors there at the church, and so I was ultimately serving under her, which was great. And so I was out in the parking lot, and we were having the Christmas time services. Okay. And, a lot of churches do that, where they'll have them at different times, like in the evenings, not necessarily just on Christmas Eve.
Right.
And so our church does that. And so I was out there serving, it was a couple of years ago, and it was like kind of sleety, like real cold. We were expecting kind of a lower turnout because of the weather. And I had brought all my hunting gear, because I was going to be the one standing down at the corner waving and greeting people as they turned off the street into the parking lot. Mm-hmm. And so I knew, like, the weather's about to suck. So I need to be dressed adequately. And fortunately, being a hunter, I have the equipment to do that. Yeah. And so, albeit camouflage, I did sport the reflective vest with me down there, so I didn't get run over. But I was standing down by the road, this busy road through our town, waving, holding the flashlight and waving and smiling. And of course I had worship music playing in my pocket, but the car's driving by, I can't see that. But I'm smiling and waving at all the cars and just having a great time and welcoming people in. And I was just down there having a great time. And little did I know, one of the cars I waved in, it was their first time at our church. And so they walked through the doors, and of course my wife's up there and helps greet this lady, and gets them in and gets them comfortable, gets them some drinks, and gets them ready for the service. And the lady says to my wife, "That guy you've got down there waving at the corner, he is having a great time." And just made us feel so welcome when we turned the corner. And I'm down there, it's like a mini party to me, and I'm just having a lot of fun waving people in. Right. But it made an impact on that woman with just me being faithful there every week and just signing up for that extra service. And I'm having a great time. So it doesn't mean that when we're doing these works out of our faith that it's got to suck or that it's actually like some tedious work. Yes, sometimes it is, but it's the mindset that we carry into that.
Right.
And are we doing it like I get to do this, or is it I have to do this? And so I think that plays a huge role. I think Jesus is kind of measuring that intent. Like,
sure.
What was our intent in that? Is it all obligation, or is it like we're bringing this in as an opportunity to serve him?
Right. And it multiplies too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, obviously this lady saw it, right?
Yeah.
The gentleman earlier that you mentioned earlier that from church last week, those are great examples right there, where it will multiply and really, and because when other people see you acting on behalf of God and on behalf of Jesus, they're in turn going to want to do the same.
Right. They want to do the same, and they want to share about it.
Yeah.
And hey, these guys over here were doing this, and it was fantastic. And so you share those things, and next thing you know, you're inviting more people in. They get to see what's happening, but then they get to emulate that into their lives and to start developing their faith.
Yeah, and I tell you, in 2024, in a world that's never been more just opposite ends of the spectrum, we need more of that in our world today. To bring people together. We're all should be Christ followers, that we hope for, and we need to be working together as a team, and not be trying to figure out what one person's doing wrong. You know what I mean? So I think that's important. I think that's you talk about that attitude and that mindset. That's so critical. And I think that's really what we want to drive home with our listeners about this episode.
Right.
And so, in thinking to that, let's move on to what kind of action steps can we show our folks out there? So I'm going to go. We had a couple that we want to share with everybody out there. I'm going to go first. I think that first things first. We need to make sure. Hey, you're a follower of Christ at this point. We want to. We're not going to. We're going to make that assumption that that you're already been saved. You've already accepted Christ as your Savior. We hope that you have. Heck, if you haven't, you got a question about that, hey, send us a note. We'd be happy to talk more about that, and we'll have future podcasts on that as well.
Yeah.
But if you are already a believer and you have been saved by grace, as we've talked about today, we encourage everybody to just spend time in your prayer and asking God to use you, to send you out, like Isaiah in chapter 6. Where Isaiah said, "Send me." We're asking God to give permission to interrupt us,
That's right.
and to be used by God. We can't, if we're concerned about, okay, God, I believe now, and I want to do good works for you, and I believe my works are genuine. Well, what do I do? Well, we got to ask for it.
Right.
It's the first things first. Ask God for the opportunities. Create opportunities where you can serve Jesus, where you can be the hands and feet. I think that if we do that, we're going to see it more. Yeah, I mean, God's still going to prompt you whether you prayed or not. Let's be honest. But at the same time, if we want to maximize, we're not here just to check a box, right? We're here to get the most out of however many days we have left in this life. So first action step would be to just spend that, when you're in that prayer time, but I hope that you're in already, to ask God to create those opportunities to interrupt you and to send you out, and with the spirit of Isaiah.
Right. It's almost like getting ourselves ready.
Yes.
Like mentally telling yourself, all right, God, here I am. I'm ready for you. Send me. And it's for you saying that, I think, opening ourselves up to be like, hey, I'm making myself vulnerable now.
Yes.
I think that's important. Yeah, and so I think that kind of rolls straight into what we've already talked about too, is in the second step is when we feel that prompting from the Holy Spirit, that we're obedient to that, and that we step into that, and that we're willing to help others. And it's one of those where, like, as we're serving other people, we need to remember, like, we're serving Jesus. And I think it's easy to get distracted and to lose that focus. And so just remember, when you are being obedient and you're serving, do it like, envision Jesus standing there.
Right.
And, whether it's as a usher, I'm getting Jesus a seat at church today, or I'm helping change Jesus' tire on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Like, it's an opportunity to serve him. And I think that it's really that mindset. We get to do this. It's not we have to do this. We get to do this. Exactly. I get to make dinner for my family tonight. Why? Because I love them. I love Jesus. I love them. And so I think it's not I have to make dinner tonight because that's what I'm supposed to do as a dad and a husband. It's I get to do that because I love them so much. And so I think it's easy for us to lose that focus and that attitude that we get to bring to that situation.
Absolutely. The mindset is what it's all about, really. I mean, it's going to be, there's going to be days where, you know, hey, it's a, man, God, I got all this stuff to do. I've had this terrible day. I'm on my way somewhere else, you know, because we all have busy lives. I'm just going from one thing to the other. My calendar's booked all the time, you know. But the reality is it's going to be some time where you are inconvenienced, you know. But that's okay. I mean, but ultimately, if we envision Jesus in front of us, all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier.
Right. It does.
It doesn't matter if that guy was real annoying, or if you got somewhere else to be, or you know whatever it might be. That's just maybe a worldly drag, so to speak. Right. It's not kind of like, oh man, this is a bummer. No, that's not the right attitude. You know, Jesus laid it all out there, right? In Matthew, you know, that this is our, we're serving him when we do that. And I think if we had that mindset, if we're asking God to provide us those opportunities and to have the right mindset when those opportunities come around, it's going to be a lot easier to be obedient. And then when we're obedient, it's going to multiply many, many times over. Really that is where we all need to be.
That's right. And I think it's important to keep in mind too that when he sends us out to go do these things, it doesn't have to be all the way to Africa.
No.
It doesn't have to be around the world. It's in our daily work, in our homes, at church, as we're out watching the kids do taekwondo or playing whatever sports they're playing. Like, it's one of those things where wherever we are, we can serve Jesus there.
Yeah.
And so I think that trying to think, oh, that's what missionaries are doing. Yeah, that's what they're doing over there. Our job is to be that missionary here, and we're to serve Jesus here.
Yeah, and he might send you to Africa.
He might.
You know, I'm not saying that he won't. That's what we're saying. But the most likely scenario is he's probably going to ask you to serve him right where you are today,
right where you're planted.
Exactly. So you're here for a reason. You were put in this time and in this life, in this era, this season, everything for a reason.
Yep.
So let's take advantage of those opportunities. And when we do, our life's going to be a lot better, and we're going to make a difference in this world. And hey, look, we're not, if you haven't noticed, we're not professional podcasters here. You know what I mean? This is a great example of it. You know, I mean, God asked us to do something that we were uncomfortable doing. And we hope that we're getting better, and we're encouraging you guys, because that's our goal. But you know, this is a great example right here, what we're sitting down doing today. So
that's right.
So before we wrap up today, just obviously thanks everybody for listening in. I want to remind you that we'd love to get feedback from everyone out there. Our email address will be in the notes. It's also discipleshiponrepeat@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, good or bad. Hey, throw it at us, man. Let us know what's going on. You know, if you got suggestions or questions or anything like that, you're struggling in your own faith, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to pray for you. Anything we can do to make a difference in someone else's life, that's what we're here to do. Yep. And our goal, to remind everybody, is to entertain, enlighten, and encourage you. And we just hope that everyone has done that. But until the meantime, we're going to have another episode coming for you real soon. But in the meantime, hope everybody is out there having a good day, and keep grinding.